Hello, everybody. Today, I want to provide a lesson um, about the four freedoms. This is more of a big picture lesson. It's not necessarily an assignment yet, but it is some information that I think that you're going to find important, and I also think it's something that you're going to need to know in order to move forward. Um, what we're looking at right here is the original Four Freedoms paintings. And I know many of you have already listened to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Four Freedoms speech. Now, the artist who created these paintings was named Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell was a painter who tried to capture American life around him during his lifetime. These paintings were relatively early in his work, and I'd just like to explain each of these paintings to you. First, I'm just going to talk about the titles. The one in the upper left with the two grandparents with the big turkey in their hand is Norman Rockwell's painting called Freedom from Want. Freedom from Want. The one below that, with the two parents tucking their children into bed, is called Freedom from Fear. Freedom from Fear. The one on the upper right of the man who is standing up while everyone is looking at him, that is called the Freedom of Speech painting by Norman Rockwell. And the one below that is Freedom of Worship. Now, the first one I'm going to start talking about is the Freedom from Want. Now, if you haven't had a chance to listen to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Four Freedoms speech, you should definitely do that. But just a couple things about this piece of work here. Now, all of these paintings are very, very famous in American culture. They seem to be timeless, and they seem to be something that Americans like to go back to in a time of need. And I think right now a lot of Americans are feeling nervous and stressed about the coronavirus, and I think that it wouldn't surprise me at all if you started to see paintings like this popping up that sort of help ground people in what they might consider American traditional culture. And I'm going to talk about the idea of what America looks like a little later after I describe these paintings. The Freedom from Want painting, which is on the top left-hand corner, that painting was Norman Rockwell's least favorite of the four paintings, from what I've read. It was what they would consider a classic Thanksgiving photograph or painting, trying to capture this idea of people who have enough to share, who family is a big component of freedom from want. They have a roof over their head, and they have a substantial amount of wealth, sort of a middle class view of America. The turkey is sort of representing the bounty of the family. The grandparents being the matriarch and patriarch, they call it, the matriarch being the grandmother, the patriarch being the grandfather. And you can see it seems like a relatively joyous occasion. Some of the artistic techniques that Rockwell used in this was the way he organized the cups, the glasses, and the plates. They call it a visual landing, meaning the painting takes our eyes from the bottom of the painting up to the turkey, and the focus of the painting is sort of on the turkey. There's a lot of contrast. There's very bright whites, and then some really dark colors as well. This painting, as I said, was Norman Rockwell struggled with. It wasn't something that he was never completely satisfied with, but it was a very popular painting when it came out. I'm going to go down here, and now I'm going to talk about the freedom from fear painting, which is the two parents standing over their two kids. Back in this time period, it was not unusual for kids to share bedrooms. I know that in my grandparents' house, they had 3 bedrooms and they had 8 children. So they had one parent, the parents had a bedroom, the daughter had a bedroom, and then the 7 boys shared triple bunks. They had 3 triple bunks in one room. Also, you have to remember this in the 1940s, 1930s, where we had just gotten over the Great Depression. And at that time, people had much less than they do today. I know that most households have many more items and much more space than the average household did in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Now, Norman Rockwell's reason for creating this painting was the United States was a nation in fear when these paintings came out. World War II was starting, and actually, at the time of this particular painting, I believe the war hadn't started, but a lot of Americans were very apprehensive about joining the war, meaning that they were sort of terrified of the idea of going into a world war, and many people wanted to avoid going into World War II. And a lot of it had to do with the tragedy of World War I and how people felt like we should mind our own business and stay out of wars that are in other places like Europe. So again, this was a painting that was put together, and at the time, many Americans did not want to enter World War II because they felt like it was not something they should get involved with. It was just nothing but going to be trouble for the American people. That changed after Pearl Harbor, but at this time of the painting, that was the average sentiment of the majority of the people in the United States. Now, you can't see it, but on the newspaper, the title of the newspaper, and I'm sure you guys will be able to get and take a look at this a little closer on your own if you'd like to. But if you enlarge that, the newspaper actually says bombing horror hits. And now that is not talking about Pearl Harbor, which for many years I thought it was. I found out later that it was actually talking about the bombings that were happening in London by the German Luftwaffe, which was the German Air Force. They were bombing London, and they were pretty much blowing the city into pieces. And the British were one of the last countries to be able to stand up against Germany and Hitler and Italy and Mussolini and this sort of tide of fascism in Europe. So most countries had already either surrendered to or been overpowered by Germany or Italy. And Britain was one of the countries that was able to resist being overrun but was losing in the war, particularly early in the war. So some of the concepts around this painting is Rockwell clearly wanted to show who the protectors were, being the parents, who they were protecting, being the children, and also he really wanted to show what the parents were protecting their kids from, and that was the outside world or the horror of World War II that was soon to be arriving in the United States in the form of Pearl Harbor. So now I'm going to move up and talk to you guys a little bit about freedom of speech. As you can see on the top right-hand corner, you have an individual who is, I guess I would describe as working class. He looks like he's probably a machinist or an automotive mechanic or an electrician, somebody who works with his hands. From what I read about this painting, Rockwell wanted to emphasize that the person was literate. And also you'll notice that many of the people around this person are staring at him with admiration or with respect. And so Rockwell wanted to show there was some sort of working class equity, that people of all walks of life were welcome to speak out in public. Now the setting or the location of this particular painting was supposed to be at a city hall meeting or a town hall meeting. For most of America back in the 1930s and 40s, town hall meetings were something that most people went to. And what Rockwell wanted to show in this is that all voices were welcome. And this, believe it or not, was an attempt to do that. One of the things that you'll notice about the character His hands are a little bit dirty, and that's that working class background. You'll notice that the characters who are listening, Norman Rockwell actually made their ears a little bit bigger than would be normal, and that was to emphasize this idea of listening. Another interesting thing about this character who is speaking or who is standing up in this particular piece of art is that he looks very similar to a national hero in American folklore or culture or history, and that is Abraham Lincoln. A lot of people have commented how Rockwell would always have these characters in some of his paintings that sort of look like a young Abraham Lincoln to draw a connection to the past. On the bottom right hand is freedom of worship, and that's freedom of worship. And this is Rockwell's attempt at showing diversity within religion in the United States. I'm not sure if you can read the words at the top, but it says, each according to the dictates of his own conscience. Basically, that's saying every person has the right to believe and worship any religion they wish and in any way that they wish. So Norman Rockwell was trying to promote what the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights promotes, and that is freedom of worship. Now you'll notice that, and this is from what I've read again, is that the gentleman down on the bottom right-hand corner is, I believe, supposed to represent a Muslim. We have a woman with the rosary beads. Rosary beads, I think, typically are connected to Catholicism. The man who is also looks like Abraham Lincoln, who has who has his hand on his chin, is sort of representing a term called the thinker, or the person who contemplates. I think this is somebody who's probably wanting to represent the idea of the atheist or the agnostic, the person who is questioning or the person who is not practicing a religion. You'll notice that there's some racial diversity in this painting, and at the time, from what I've read, Norman Rockwell was living in a primarily Christian Protestant-based town, which was very common at this point in America. My guess is he didn't have a lot of diversity in his town. So in this painting, I think he was integrating more of a diverse view of worship than he might have seen in his own town that he lived in. Two of these paintings, on the right-hand side, freedom of speech and freedom of worship, which are on the right-hand side, these two paintings are representing freedoms that are guaranteed under the First Amendment to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. These two paintings over here, freedom from want and freedom from fear, are not in the Bill of Rights and not in the Constitution. But they are ideas from Franklin Delano Roosevelt's speech. He specifically talked about all people in the world being free from want, and all people in the world have the right to grow up and live in a place where they are free from fear. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt put this speech together, he knew that he was dealing with a country that was living in fear of what was coming and what was happening in the world. And I, just like to say that right now, many of us are struggling about our feelings around anxiety and fear when it comes to what's happening in the United States today. There's some obvious things that should be mentioned in these paintings. One is that they are very representative of what Norman Rockwell saw. And that does not mean that they were representative of what America was. America has always been diverse. America has always had people of color. But I think Norman Rockwell was trying to paint his view of what America was from the town that he was living in. I do not think he was trying to capture a view of other people's perspective, but mainly his own. those of you who are interested in looking at Norman Rockwell's work will see that he actually did have some much more diverse paintings as he traveled the world. He, of course, became a celebrity later in his life, and he was somebody that began to travel more. And once he did begin to travel more, he started to paint and represent some of the diversity that he saw throughout the world. Let me see if I can pull one of his paintings up here. Let's see if we can get that. Yes, we can. So this painting here is a Norman Rockwell painting, a very famous one. It's in the United Nations building, I believe, and it says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." And Norman Rockwell actually put himself in this painting, and he's right here. He places himself in this painting because he wanted to emphasize the idea of him living in a world community and how important it was for all of us to live in a world community and for all of us to celebrate all of the different diversity that exists in the world. And this painting, I believe, is still in the United Nations. Let me go back here to the Four Freedoms. Now, the reason that it's important we take a look at these is because this is the basis of the Four Freedoms expedition, but it is something that is from the past, but it is also what I would call timely, and it is something that we have to look at in order to understand where America was at in the 1930s and 40s and what they grabbed onto when they were living in fear. And this painting, or these series of paintings, were something that Americans were drawn to, gravitated towards, that was connecting them to the country when there was uncertainty. One thing that all of you are going to do is you are going to create pieces of art that represent your specific political message, something that is important to you. To Norman Rockwell, it was freedom from want, it was freedom from fear, it was freedom of speech and freedom of worship. You're not going to do 4 of these. You can if you'd like. But what we're hoping is you're going to create one collage that is going to talk about what specific political message is important to you. What are the things that you think are an issue, an idea, a problem, a celebration, something that's really that you want to create a piece of art to represent a specific political message for others to see, so that you can teach them, you can teach other people about your thoughts and ideas around what you think is important. Now, next week, I'm going to create another video, and I'm going to pick some student work from years past, and I'm going to put some collages up here for you guys, and I will talk about the messages of these collages, and I'm going to talk about some of the work that kids did in the past, some students at King. So I hope you found this helpful. Again, please listen to the Franklin Delano Roosevelt speech. I believe that Miss Hatch has posted a link to that. It may be difficult to hear. It's a very old video or very old recording. You can also search out the actual lyrics or the speech itself in a written form if that is something you think would be more beneficial to you. Anyway, I hope this is helpful for you guys today. And please make sure all of your classmates are aware of what's going on. Make sure everybody's checked into what we're doing, and help your classmates if they're stuck on anything. And of course, all the teachers want to encourage you to contact any teacher when you're stuck or you have something that you need a little help with. So this is Mr. Clifford signing off, and I hope that you guys have a great day.